no increment, and Hikaru's got the plan. He knows exactly what his next moves are going to be. And he also knows that if he wins a pawn, another one might not be far off.
As I said in the previous match, the key to this match is the speed. I was told that Hikaru should be the favorite because he's faster. By chess form, Levon is playing fantastic chess, but he was slower in that first game, pulled off the draw. Here, he's down a minute and a half. He can't continue at this pace, or the initiative will be too strong later on.
Yep, so we see g6. This makes sense. I think, in hindsight, he would have preferred to do this instead of playing b6 at all, because this knight b5 move was very strong. Queen takes a7. You can't touch the knight on b5 because the rook is still hanging. That's because black's king is not traditionally castled. So queen a7, if you take it, Eric, we've been talking about winning 2 pawns this entire time. I think it's about to happen.
And if you play, I don't know, a move like queen b4, maybe I can play rook takes c6 there. I have queen a8 check.
Yeah.
The tactics start to flow. Levon was up a pawn, and now we're looking at positions where he might be down a pawn and down a couple minutes on the clock.
Yeah,
Can
and
he salvage this?
If you play h5 or some other move, you're also threatening queen takes c7, knight a7, hitting the rook on c8, hitting the pawn on c6. Of course, there's also rook f to c1. This looks like not only an advantage on the clock, but Hikaru is very comfortable. He might even just be better.
I think he is better. The base of the pawns has been broken. Will rook take c6 be played? Does it win a pawn? Yes. Maybe Levon can play king g7. Hikaru's looking for something better. You can do queen takes b6.
Right.
That c6 pawn is still pinned. He's sitting up straight right now, looking for a punishing move. He knows Levon is uncomfortable. Look at that clock. Look at that queen side. The initiative is paid off by Hikaru. How much can he extract?
Absolutely. King g7 wants to be the next move played. This is a very critical moment because he's trying to extract the maximum from his advantage. The knight on b5 cannot really... I mean, you can play moves like knight c7, but Eric, you got to be sure about knight c7 because you're putting your knight behind enemy lines. It does mean that the c6 pawn is hanging, and maybe king g7, there's knight e6.
Yeah, there's 2 approaches here. What you mentioned, we want to disrupt black's king from getting a g7, or win as many pawns as possible. Queen b7 might be both. Hikaru's trying to make life as uncomfortable for Levon. Don't allow that king into the game. Then black is playing down the rook on h8.
I was going to ask if he's planning to take on c6 there, but it's kind of a combination of moves. Knight c7 played now. He sees knight e6 as a possibility. The c6 pawn is completely hanging. If you try to defend it with c5, I mean, we can start taking things. Not only is there knight e6, but pawns are loose here.
Pawns are very loose, and if you allow white to take on c6, the rook on f1 swings behind, and all the tactics favor white.
Yeah, knight e6 is a really, really crushing move here.
Rook b8,
wins on the
knight
spot.
e6.
Yeah, wins on the spot. If the king goes to h7, you just take on f7. If the king goes to g8, the rooks are not protecting each other. It forced a move from Levon to stop knight e6. Now it must be time to collect. Rook takes c6, rook c1 coming. The b6 pawn is also loose. Unless there's a pin, a really unpleasant pin on this knight on c7, Eric, Hikaru has an amazing position.
Everything is loose. d5 is loose. b6 is loose. You just can't fall for some tactics, some pin on the c file. Rook b8, good move by Levon. He has to recognize he's behind on the clock significantly. Can't keep playing at the pace that he's at.
Yeah. And another idea for Levon, if you start to think, what can black do? I'm looking at knight g4, Eric, queen g5, and queen h5. Very unpleasant to deal with queen h2. The obvious question is, does he have time to do that with all the pressure that he's facing? I'm thinking if queen to a6, we might have more time for something like that. Knight to g4, or maybe h5, h4. There are still some ideas for Levon as Hikaru maybe completely abandons that king side.
Queen a7 instead of queen a6 reintroduces knight e6 as a move. I
That's
like
right.
it. And as you mentioned, Levon could consider that, but with 2 minutes and a half on the clock, it's such a tough task. You have 2 thoughts. Defending, do you really have time to think about attacking? It's a hard pivot in your head.
He's always had this knight e6. He could have played it on the last move, but there's a nice resource. Queen captures e6 with the queen hanging. That's why it wasn't played on the previous move, and it is a threat now. Hence, king to h7. Wants to just remove the king from the checking square, but this blocks the h file. It's obviously not a move you want to do, but played out of necessity.
I'd like to play rook fc1 here. In the future, if I get worried about my king, I might have to play queen a4 and bring the queen back, maybe on f3. I'm looking at queen a7, queen a4, queen e1, queen f3. I know that's long-term, but that's only if it gets a little hairy around the king side. But Hikaru needs to find a way to break through here.
Yeah, I like rook c1. I mean, rook c1, queen a4 works nicely because the queen comes back to d1 while the rooks are already doubled. The knight on c7 can always retreat to b5, and I don't think that black can get things going quick enough, right? Knight g4, queen g5, there's just no time to do that, and your king is on h7, which means f7 is a loose pawn.
F7's a loose pawn and D5 is a loose pawn. So maybe white brings the queen back to a square like A4, even to B3, and all of a sudden you're eyeballing D5, and after you eyeball D5, you'll be hitting F7.
Yeah, this, look at the time, right? We've talked about it before. It's here once again. Hikaru Nakamura has another opportunity to use the board and the clock. I really like the idea of that queen A4, Eric, and it has been played. The knight is secure on C7.
Secure on A7, the C6 rook is really well defended, and we're looking at threats like knight takes D5. Knight takes D5 is in the air. That would be a second pawn for Nakamura.
Yep. Knight takes D5. I mean, there's just nothing you can really do about this. If you take on C6, the queen can capture back. You can also build that up with queen B5 or queen B3.
Oh,
we
we're
mentioned
getting
knight
close to
D5.
tactics.
I think it's just playable. Knight takes D5 if you capture with the knight. The rook on C8 hangs. Knight takes D5 if you take on C6. You can just recapture.
It looks good to me.
Right? You're not taking on E7. Instead, you're recapturing on C6. You don't want a situation, Eric, where you allow rook takes C6, rook takes C1, and knight G4. That could lead to checkmate.
Hikaru sees that tactic. He's just checking if there's something better. He's in full control here. Do you want to go up 2 pawns? He says yes. Knight takes D5. The queen comes in. White is up 2 pawns. Hikaru's up almost a minute and a half. And we're looking at endgames, like even queen E5 check.
Yep.
Is probably just a winning endgame, but he might want more. He might want to make life a little harder for Levon.
Was thinking back to that last game, maybe. You know, do you want to immediately commit to that flag? I think he's probably going to keep the game going a little bit, but it's nice to point out queen E5 followed by F4. It is winning. And it's a little easier now, Eric. He will play queen E5. If the rook can capture back, he's got those 2 pawns in the middle. That is something.
But you're right. Why trade now when you can get your opponent to think more?
Yeah.
And a move like rook c5, Levon is spending very valuable seconds.
Yes, he is.
Calculating things out. He doesn't want to end up in a totally lost position. He just spent 10, 15 seconds on b4. That's not going to cut it. Queen c4, fantastic move. Preparing rook c7, still watching over the b4 pawn, and maybe d5. At some moment, you're looking to play rook c7, maybe use the d5 pawn, start kicking black backwards, and generating threats on the king side.
Yeah, I like the move d5. You follow with queen d4. He has a lot of ways he can play this. A queen endgame, for example, is, I mean, you can play that position forever. Queen c5, first move that I would consider here.
Queen c5, queen d5. Queen d5 covers a2, hits f7. Queen c5 first, always good to throw. Why not throw those moves in?
Yeah.
It takes time off the clock. Hikaru has many win conditions here.
d5, queen d4, Eric, and the queen just kind of sits pretty, covering absolutely everything. I would play queen d4 right now, get the queen behind the pawn. Yes, there's a check or 2 that can be thrown in, but d6 plus queen d4, he's going to push that pawn all the way. The 100% winning on the board, Eric, and he also has tons of extra time. This surely is a win for Hikaru.
The only counterplay typically in these positions is a perpetual. There's no perpetual. Levon Aronian resigns. Hikaru takes the lead. Game 2 of this quarterfinal match.